Hey guys, tonight we journey back to colonial America, where hygiene isn't exactly sparkling, and oral care is something between a hopeful ritual and an act of bravery. Picture this. It's midnight in a creaky wooden cabin. The fire's embers have long since cooled. Your wool blanket scratches like 1,000 tiny burrs, and your mouth? It's pulsing with that familiar throbbing ache that tells you, congratulations, another tooth is trying to evacuate your skull. You groan softly, sit up in your straw-stuffed mattress, and glance toward the small wooden washstand. There, nestled between a pewter chamber pot and a candle stub, lies your dental toolkit. It's less kit and more assortment. A cloth rag, a burnt stick, and a curious little tin marked tooth powder, walnut, and bone. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments below. It's always fun to see where in the world we're brushing our ghostly teeth together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your fingers find the tin. You pop it open. A faint whiff of charcoal, dried mint, and something suspiciously like clove oil hits your nose. This is your reality. In a time before fluoride or floss, before plastic bristles or porcelain veneers, Americans relied on a curious concoction of burned plant matter and folk wisdom to scrub the decay away. You dip a corner of the cloth in the powder and raise it to your mouth. The sensation is equal parts gritty and herbal. It's not exactly minty fresh, but it's trying its best. Some nights you wonder if it's helping at all. Most nights, you're just glad it doesn't taste like boiled leather. Charcoal, specifically from willow, birch, or hickory, was a household staple. Not just for teeth, but for stomach issues, for fire starting, and for filtering swampy well water. It made sense to rub it on your molars too, right? At least that's what your neighbor insists, when she brings you a small packet of scorched bark wrapped in muslin. As you keep brushing, you wince at a particularly tender spot near the back. That molar's been bad for weeks. You tried rinsing with salt water, then cider vinegar, then someone's questionable suggestion of applying mashed garlic and goose fat. Nothing helped. But tonight you've made peace with it. Just you, the charcoal, and the hope that the pain goes away before morning chores. You shift in your chair and remember a story your uncle told about how in his youth, their dentist was a blacksmith with an iron hook. You laugh quietly to yourself, although laughing hurts your jaw. He claimed to have seen the man yank 4 teeth in an afternoon, pausing only to wipe his hands on his apron. Historians still argue whether most colonial Americans lost their teeth due to sugar, tobacco, or sheer neglect. But honestly, it may have been all three doing a little dance together. There's a soft clink as you set the tin down. The powder leaves a faint film on your tongue, earthy, slightly bitter, oddly comforting in its texture. You imagine all the other colonial folks performing this same little ritual. Maybe not every night. Some were too tired, some too skeptical, and some too poor to spare charcoal for anything but cooking. But enough to keep the tradition alive. Some people used a chewed twig instead. They'd fray one end of a sassafras or dogwood stick until it became a kind of makeshift brush, then rub it along their teeth and gums with surprising precision. You tried that once. It left splinters in your lip, and you've never quite forgiven the friend who suggested it. You stand and stretch. The floor creaks under your feet, and the smell of old wood and ash fills your nose. You walk to the window, look out into the night. Somewhere beyond the trees, wolves or wind, or your neighbor's hound howl into the dark. The stars are sharp above you, and your mouth feels, if not clean, then at least a bit less miserable. You think about how strange it is, how universal the need to care for our teeth has been. From Egyptian chew sticks and Roman bone tools to your tin of powder and damp rag, humans have always fought against the slow, painful surrender of the molar. Not very successfully, but still. You return to the bed and blow out the candle, your mouth tingling faintly with the ghosts of ash and sage. Somewhere in the night, a floorboard groans in a different room. Probably just the house settling. Probably. You close your eyes, trying not to grind your teeth. Morning comes with a rooster's declaration. Though, frankly, you didn't sleep well enough to appreciate his enthusiasm. Your mouth feels dry and oddly warm, with that lingering metallic tang left behind by the night's charcoal cleaning. You sit up slowly, rubbing the sleep from your eyes as you reach again for the little tin of tooth powder. It's dented now, the lid slightly loose, but inside there's still enough for a few more days. You remind yourself to burn more willow branches before the next market day. Today, though, you're trying a recipe, one that Mrs. Claybrook, the neighbor who collects birch sap in the spring, swears by. She's always full of advice, some useful, some baffling. She once recommended a compress of mashed pigeon feather and vinegar for foot cramps. But she seems to have all her teeth, so you listen, tentatively. The recipe is simple, in theory. Equal parts burnt willow bark, dried sage, powdered oyster shell, and a touch of salt. Optional extras include a few drops of clove oil, if you're fancy, or mint leaves, if it's summer. You gather what you can. You've got the charcoal from a recent chimney sweep, some sea salt from a friend who lives near Boston, and an old oyster shell you hope counts as powdered if you smash it hard enough. You lay the ingredients out on a slab of wood that once served as a cheese board. The charcoal crumbles easily under the pestle. It smells like bonfire, and oddly like tea. The sage takes more effort. It's crumbly and stubborn, but eventually you coax it into a dusty green pile. The oyster shell resists. You wrap it in linen and hit it with the heel of your boot. Progress. As you mix it all together in a tin, your fingers dusted with soot and herbs, you marvel at how domestic medicine blends the practical with the mystical. No one's quite sure why this works, but it sort of does. Sometimes, in a way. Historians still argue whether charcoal truly scrubbed away plaque or just left the illusion of cleanliness. But in the colonial mindset, if it smelled fresh and looked gray enough, it was basically medicine. You remember hearing about an alternative method involving powdered brick and honey. The idea, supposedly, was that the brick acted like a scouring pad, and the honey distracted you from the pain. You tried it once. You don't like to talk about it. You apply your new concoction to a stiff, bristled brush, actually an old broom head someone cut down into a crude handle, and work it across your teeth with slow, deliberate scrubs. The salt stings. The sage tastes like regret. The oyster shell grits between your molars like tiny ghosts of chowder past. But there's something satisfying about the process. Methodical. Intentional. You think about how hard it must have been to convince people to brush at all. Oral hygiene wasn't exactly common sense back then. More often, people used mouthwashes made from wine, vinegar, or even urine. Yes, urine, though that was more a European habit. Colonial Americans, generally more Protestant and less flamboyantly Renaissance, preferred things you could dry over a fire or mash in a bowl. Or chew. One particularly odd but persistent trick involved rubbing teeth with the inside of a freshly cut potato. Something about the starch drawing out impurities. It probably didn't do much, but it's still a step up from rabbit brain paste, which some texts casually mention without much elaboration. Honestly, the less we know about that, the better. As the gritty foam builds in your mouth, you spit into a bucket and catch sight of yourself in a bit of polished tin. Your teeth are not white, not straight, but clean enough by local standards. The upper molars are a little darker, That's normal, probably. You poke at one with your finger. Still loose. It wobbles like a stubborn barn latch. You sit back and wipe your hands on your apron. The smell of burnt herbs lingers in the air, mixing with the morning scent of bread and churned butter. Life in the colonies might be hard, but at least you've got your teeth, most of them, and a good story to tell about your willow bark dental treatment next time you visit the town square. There, you'll find other herbalists and peddlers hawking their own remedies. One man swears by a powder made with burnt deer antler and river clay. Another sells tooth tonic in little green bottles. It smells like turpentine and probably is turpentine, but his teeth are blindingly white, possibly fake. You once heard about a traveling dentist who offered not only tooth pulling, but full dental makeovers, filed enamel, glued-on ivory caps, the works. He operated out of a wagon painted with smiling cherubs and claimed his tools were blessed by Saint Apollonia, the patron saint of toothaches. Naturally, finishing your cleaning ritual, you cork the tin and tuck it back onto its shelf beside a jar of pickled onions and a little carved box of cloves. You make a mental note to ask around for more sage and more oyster shells, and to avoid anything labeled rabbit-derived. You smile carefully into the morning sun and imagine a future where brushing doesn't taste like chimney soot and shellfish. Maybe one day people will have mint-flavored pastes in little tubes and brushes that don't shed bristles mid-scrub. But for now, you've got your blend, your ritual, and, miraculously, your front teeth. Not bad for a Tuesday in 1742. Outside, the sun climbs lazily through the trees as you button your coat and step into the dusty lane. You're headed to the town apothecary. Not for anything urgent, but because they've just received a shipment of West Indies lime dust, which someone claimed is excellent for rubbing on the gums. You're skeptical, of course, but colonial boredom is persuasive. As you walk, your mind drifts backward. Long before there were colonies, before even the first crude log homes were raised in the New World, there were mouths to manage in old Europe. The settlers didn't arrive in America with blank slates. They brought centuries of dental habits with them, many of them ill-advised and suspiciously French. You remember your cousin Margaret describing her voyage across the Atlantic. She said that by the time they landed in Boston, the smell aboard ship was so thick with unbrushed breath and salted fish that even the rats tried to disembark first. Dental hygiene on those long journeys was an afterthought, if it happened at all. Most people brought a cloth, a bit of salt, and maybe some cloves or juniper berries. No one had room for luxuries like bristle brushes or functional molars. The English, in particular, had a habit of using tooth cloths dipped in vinegar and ashes. Some still swear by a mix of rosemary, powdered pumice, and stale ale. So long as the ale was brewed on a Wednesday, your grandfather once claimed, dead serious. Historians still argue whether these methods were carried over wholesale or adapted once colonists arrived. But what's clear is that America became a testing ground for dental improvisation. Every region had its own method. In the north, people leaned toward salt and ash scrubs. In the south, where the humidity made everything a little more pungent, folks preferred chewing herbs and pine needles, or rinsing with brandy. Medicinal, of course. Reaching the apothecary, you push open the creaky door. The place smells like licorice root and old paper. Behind the counter stands Mr. Tillingham, a man who claims to have once removed a molar from a horse. He greets you with a grin that reveals more gaps than teeth and waves you toward the new shipment. The lime dust is fine and chalky, packed in small cloth pouches. Next to it are tins labeled Tincture of Myrrh for gums and godliness, and something mysterious called Tooth Elixir of the Indies, which appears to be equal parts rum and burnt sugar. You take your time browsing, not because you need more supplies, though you're tempted by a little carved toothpick case, but because the apothecary is warm and smells better than your cottage. While you peruse, two women enter and begin debating the merits of crushed eggshell versus powdered pearl. One insists her mother used pearl daily and died with all her teeth. The other scoffs, saying her aunt tried it once, and her teeth melted like butter. You nod politely and slip away, cradling your new lime dust and a small packet of cinnamon bark. Not for your mouth, necessarily, just for the smell. But who knows? Maybe you'll chew it later for medicinal reasons. Walking back home, you pass a pair of boys scrubbing their teeth with salt-soaked corn husks. It's oddly effective. You remember trying it yourself last harvest and being pleasantly surprised? Until a splinter lodged between your incisors, and you spent 2 days unable to chew anything harder than porridge. Still, there's something admirable about their dedication. Despite the lack of dental charts, mouthwash commercials, or even a consistent understanding of what a cavity is, these early Americans tried. They scrubbed, chewed, rubbed, spit, and, when all else failed, prayed. Back home, you set your new supplies on the shelf and stare at your reflection in the dull tin mirror. There's ash under your fingernails and charcoal at the corners of your mouth. You look like someone who's either cleaning their teeth or casting a low-stakes spell. You rinse with warm water, then rub a bit of the lime dust along your gum line. It fizzes faintly. Probably normal. Tastes sharp and citrusy. Not bad, just unexpected. Like a lemon decided to punch you in the jaw and run. As the sensation fades, your teeth feel almost squeaky. It's a new feeling, and you're not entirely sure it's good. You smile, and it makes a faint, gritty sound, like a boot sliding on gravel. That's either very effective cleaning, or the beginning of some sort of citrus-based erosion. Time will tell. Still, there's pride in this process. Your teeth may not be white, straight, or even fully attached, but they are yours, and they are maintained. You know neighbors who haven't brushed in weeks. You saw one man light his pipe with a coal, burn his lip, and then declare himself cleaned by fire. No thank you. You make a mental note to record today's mixture in your little home remedy book. 1 part lime dust, 1 part sage, 1 part mild panic. Later that evening, as the light softens and you prepare for bed, you perform the ritual again. Powder on cloth, gentle scrub, careful rinse. You sit near the fire and reflect on just how much effort goes into keeping your teeth from simply leaving. You think again of Margaret's voyage, of the old European habits still clinging to life here in the colonies. It's comforting, in a strange way. Generations before you also stared into polished metal, mouth full of soot, wondering whether they'd still be able to chew cornmeal mush in 10 years. Some things never change. The evening wears on with its familiar creaks and murmurs, the way the hearth cracks just before the logs settle, the slight rustle of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling, the muffled shuffle of mice rethinking their route through your floorboards. You dip your cloth into water, warmed in a tin basin, then dab away the last flecks of lime dust still clinging to your lip. Clean, or at least clean-ish, you settle into the wooden chair beside the hearth and consider your next task. Brushing by candlelight. Candles, you've come to realize, are less a romantic ambiance and more a practical menace. They drip, they sputter, and they cast shadows that make your reflection, however crude and metallic, look like a haunted oil painting. But they're better than nothing. And at least you're not brushing your teeth by firelight like some of your less fortunate neighbors, who still use bundled reeds and whale oil lamps to navigate their oral hygiene. You wrap the cloth tightly around your index finger, dip it in a new mixture, a touch of salt, a smear of pine tar, and just a pinch of crushed clove, and raise it to your mouth. You begin rubbing in slow, deliberate circles, wincing slightly as you pass over that molar that feels more wobbly each day. The salt stings. The pine tastes like you're licking a holiday wreath. But somehow, it all feels routine now. Familiar. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when you didn't brush at all, just rinsed occasionally and hoped for the best. But then came the great tooth incident of last fall, when you tried to bite into a raw apple and ended up with half of it lodged between 2 molars and a week-long toothache that radiated up into your ear. That was when you swore you'd take better care of your mouth, even if it meant licking trees and scrubbing with burnt bones. Interestingly, while you dab carefully behind your bottom incisors, you remember reading, or more accurately, hearing someone say, that in England, Queen Elizabeth I's teeth had gone black in her later years, likely from a combination of imported sugar and rose-flavored toothpaste. Historians still argue whether her infamous smile was due more to tooth decay or lead-based makeup. But either way, she set a sort of macabre fashion trend. Black teeth became, for a brief and rather alarming moment, a sign of wealth. You pause, glance at the candle, and wonder what kind of message your own teeth are sending. Probably something along the lines of resourceful, mildly flammable, and trying her best. You switch hands and begin working on the upper molars. The bristles of your old broomhead toothbrush have long since bent into submission, and now serve mostly as gentle suggestion rather than cleaning implement. You'll need a new one soon, though you're dreading the process. Not because it's difficult, just because getting boar bristles from the tanner costs more than it should, and last time the bristles weren't properly boiled. You spent 3 days tasting pig and contemplating your life choices. Others use rags, like you, or chew twigs, or even just swish salt water and call it done. One bold neighbor recently declared he was training his body to self-clean through thought. His breath smells like something exhumed from the lower shelf of a fishmonger's cart. You don't plan to follow his example. In truth, oral hygiene among colonial Americans is more a matter of practicality than vanity. You don't brush to impress, though, if pressed, you'd admit to paying special attention on Sundays and before market days. No, you brush because you have to. A lost tooth can mean weeks of pain, infection, and eventually a very polite wooden box in the ground. You think of the apothecary's new lime dust again. The way it fizzed faintly on your tongue. You're not entirely convinced it's safe, but it's interesting. And in an era where variety is limited and mint hasn't been invented yet, that's worth something. You rinse with a mug of warm water steeped in thyme. Another suggestion from Mrs. Claybrook, who insists it tones the gums. It mostly tastes like boiled weeds, but it gives you an excuse to sit by the fire and breathe in the earthy scent, which reminds you of autumn walks and mushroom gathering. As you settle deeper into the chair, your teeth gently tingle from the clove and salt. You imagine what it must have been like in even earlier times, before colonists, before toothbrushes, before even the idea of dental care. Indigenous tribes had their own methods, of course, often far more effective and sensible than the practices Europeans imported. Ashes, fibrous roots, and naturally antiseptic plant extracts. We'll get to that later, you promise yourself. For now, your focus drifts back to the flames, dancing in their usual sleepy rhythm. Your cloth hangs damp on the chair's armrest, and your mouth feels not clean, exactly, but attended to, like you've done your part for the day. You smile softly, knowing that in a world where dental visits involve forceps and prayer, your nightly routine is a quiet act of rebellion against the toothless future. You don't head to bed right away. Your mouth still tingles from the salt, and you know from experience that lying down too soon after brushing is a gamble, especially when your pillow is stuffed with goose down and old paper, and your bed creaks like a haunted ship in the wind. Instead, you shuffle to the window and peer out into the cold dark. where the outline of the barber's shop flickers faintly under the moonlight. The town barber is technically also the town dentist, which is to say, he owns a pair of metal tongs and has once successfully extracted a tooth without causing the patient to faint outright. You try not to judge. That's the standard, really. Success is defined loosely, more tooth now removed than patient still talking to you. You remember your last visit well. It began with a sore molar, swollen and red like a blistered tomato. You'd tried the usual remedies, salt water, chewing licorice root, prayer, but eventually the pain won. So you trudged to Mr. Painter's barber shop, hoping for relief. He greeted you cheerfully, offered you a shot of rum, and gestured toward what looked like a milking stool. One step up from being treated on the floor, you suppose. His dental kit consisted of rusty pliers, a mallet, and a bucket, which you sincerely hoped was not part of the procedure. You were told to bite down on a strip of leather, lean your head back, and think of something peaceful. You chose cheese. The actual moment of extraction was brisk, brutal, memorable. A snap, a tug, a white-hot jolt of pain that made your vision blur. You swore loudly, something about ducks, as you recall. And when it was over, Mr. Painter gave you a soft cloth and a toffee, the irony of which was not lost on you. Historians still argue whether barber surgeons of the colonial era were better trained than their European counterparts. Some had apprenticed under physicians. Others had simply inherited their tools. Most learned on the job. And unfortunately, the job often began with livestock. What was most peculiar, though, was how casual it all was. Tooth extraction wasn't just medical. It was social. A good pull was something you bragged about. A neighborhood event. Children would gather outside the shop to listen for the screams. Someone would bring a goose. You're not sure why? There was always a goose. The tools themselves were, charitably, horrific. Forceps that looked more like fireplace tongs, hooks, files, even what Mr. Painter once referred to as a tooth key. A crooked bit of metal meant to twist molars out like corks. He explained it to you while holding it upside down and very close to your face. You politely asked if there were any alternatives. There were not. And then there were the traveling dentists. Colorful men in colorful coats, often arriving in painted wagons with slogans like "Clean teeth, clear soul," or "Heavenly smiles for earthly prices." These men promised cures, cleanings, and even artificial teeth, though half their patients never saw them again after a single pull. You once watched one of them pitch his wares in the market square, holding up a long ivory tooth and claiming it came from a bishop. Later, you saw him trying to sell the same tooth to a butcher as a hog scraper. Fake teeth, of course, were another ordeal entirely. Some were carved from ivory, others were made from porcelain or even cow bone, carefully shaped and fitted into the mouth using wire. You've heard of people using other people's teeth. Live donor dentistry, they call it, though it's rarely as voluntary as it sounds. There's a reason folks side-eye gravediggers after a particularly fresh burial. You remember once hearing someone say that George Washington's dentures were made of wood, but the truth is murkier and worse. They were a terrifying amalgamation of human teeth, horse teeth, ivory, and lead. A horror museum for the mouth. They squeaked when he ate. You find this profoundly upsetting. Still, the barbers did their best. In between shaves and haircuts, they'd grind powders, boil oils, and even dab bleeding gums with tinctures of laudanum or spirits. One even claimed to have developed a method to retighten loose teeth using beeswax and nettle roots. You passed on that one. Your cousin tried it and ended up with a swollen tongue and an unfortunate nickname, Hummelsnout. It's all a bit absurd. But then again, so is brushing your teeth with charcoal and salt by the flicker of a tallow candle. You pull the curtain shut and sigh. Tomorrow you'll check on your friend Martha, who recently had a molar pulled, and insists that drinking vinegar straight cleans the wound. You suspect she mostly likes vinegar. You finally head to bed, easing onto the straw mattress and pulling the blanket up to your chin. Your jaw throbs faintly at the memory of that barber's chair. But there's also something oddly reassuring in knowing you survived it. You've earned each wobbly tooth you still have. Somewhere across the street, the barber's candle is still burning. You imagine him scrubbing his tools, humming off-key, and preparing his leeches for whatever medical miracle he's planning next. You close your eyes and murmur, "Not tonight, Mr. Painter. Your teeth, such as they are safe, for now." Morning arrives with the smell of corn mush and the distant clatter of a milk cart. You rise slowly, jaw still tender, tongue instinctively prodding the sore tooth that survived another night. You should really leave it alone, but curiosity and pain have always been loyal dance partners. Breakfast is simple. Mush with a pat of last week's butter and a sprinkle of dried apples, mostly for morale. It's soft enough not to stress your molars, but you eat cautiously, aware that any surprise crunch might signal the end of another dental frontier. As you chew, your mind drifts toward sugar. Sweet, seductive, molar-murdering sugar. It's the reason half the colony is gumming their meals by 40. Once rare and precious, sugar had crept its way into every colonial cupboard, usually in the form of molasses or cane lumps wrapped in muslin. And oh, how it wreaks havoc on the enamel. You sip your weak chicory coffee and think about the first time you had molasses candy as a child. It was shaped like a goose, sticky, glorious, and, according to your mother, worth the ache. It pulled out one of your baby teeth and took half a silver filling with it. You were 7, and very proud. Historians still argue whether sugar was more damaging to colonial health through its impact on teeth or its influence on trade and slavery, but the dental consequences were immediate and personal. You've seen the aftermath yourself. Blackened stumps, infected roots, and that unmistakable look of someone who hasn't bitten into a crisp apple since the last king wore a wig. What makes it worse is that sugar came disguised as progress. Refined white sugar was considered a mark of wealth. Only the upper crust could afford it. So, of course, everyone wanted it. They put it in their tea, in their pudding, even in their meat pies. If it could be sweetened, it was. The mouth followed. You think of Mrs. Mayfield down the lane, who hosts afternoon teas where everything is dusted in sugar, including her conversation. She once insisted that brushing with syrup was cleansing. Her teeth say otherwise. They shimmer faintly in the sun. Not from polish, but from the thin sheen of caramelized regret. To counterbalance sugar's damage, people concocted increasingly desperate mouth remedies. Charcoal became more popular precisely because of its ability to absorb and scrape. The richer folks had imported tooth powders with chalk, coral, even ground mother of pearl. One claimed to contain dragon's tooth. You suspect it was limestone. You tried one once at the market, a fine, sweet-smelling powder said to be French-inspired. It turned your tongue lavender and tasted faintly of old wine barrels. You suspect the vendor was just selling colored flour. Still, it made your breath smell less like pickled onions, so you considered it a win. Colonial children weren't spared either. The same sugar their parents prized was given to babies to soothe teething, often wrapped in cloth and tied around a spoon. You've seen it done. You once walked in on your cousin spooning molasses directly into her toddler's mouth while singing a hymn about temperance. The irony was almost audible. Your neighbor, Thomas, a schoolteacher with exactly 3 visible teeth, recently shared a pamphlet claiming molasses was good for children's development. Strengthens the bones, it said. He offered you a taste of his special tooth tonic. Molasses, vinegar, and baking soda. You took one sip. Your mouth tried to retire. But it wasn't all doom and decay. Some colonists fought back with clever, if questionable, countermeasures. Boiled mint leaves were chewed like gum. Cinnamon bark was rubbed along the gums to heat the rot away. And nutmeg, expensive, exotic, wildly overused, was applied to sore teeth and, oddly, to the soles of the feet. You never did understand that one. You remember your Aunt Esther's strange habit of brushing with hard cheese. She swore it sealed the gaps in her teeth. It didn't. But she lived to 90 with a full set of teeth, stored in a box by her bedside, true, but still hers. There were those who gave up entirely, of course. Toothless but determined, they gummed bread crusts and mashed stews until their last days. You once shared a meal with a man who claimed his gums were twice as efficient as real teeth. You didn't argue, but you also didn't accept his offer of corn on the cob. As you finish breakfast, you sip your final bit of lukewarm chicory and glance at your toothbrush. Bristles now flattened, almost apologetically so. The salt pot sits nearby, and the clove oil bottle is half empty. You make a mental note to pick more clove buds next week, maybe trade for some from the doctor's wife, who imports hers wrapped in silk and smugness. You think about the contrast between then and now. How, once upon a time, honey was rare and sugar rarer still. How sweets were seasonal, celebratory. An orange at Christmas, a tart in spring. Now, with trade routes well worn and barrels of syrup arriving every month, sweetness is ever present, and dental pain walks beside it. Your jaw aches faintly. Not badly, just enough to remind you who's in charge. You run your tongue along your back teeth and wonder how many more years they'll last. You've outlived 3 toothbrushes, a packet of sage, 2 tins of charcoal powder, and 1 extremely ambitious spoonful of molasses taffy. Not bad, you think? Not bad at all. You rinse your mouth with a bit of water, swish it thoughtfully, and spit into the hearth ashes. The fire hisses softly in response, as if in sympathy. Or judgment, hard to say. The weather turns damp that afternoon, and with it your joints begin to ache in ways that feel familiar. That's how you know it's time for another seasonal tonic. Something with vinegar, maybe some thyme, definitely a splash of something strong enough to make you forget you're drinking vinegar and thyme. You reach for your herbal journal, a leather-bound book filled with scratched recipes, borrowed advice, and one particularly questionable entry involving boiled eel skin. It's not a pretty book, but it's yours. The cover smells of smoke and spilled sage, and the pages crinkle in protest when you turn them. Between entries on elderberry cough syrup and onion poultices, you find the dental page. Half of it is smudged from a mishap with clove oil 2 winters ago, but the entries are still legible. You've documented everything here. Every powder, every failed rinse, every time you tried something bold and lived to regret it. You skim the page titled, "Ash Recipes Do Not Repeat." A sigh escapes your lips as you remember the ill-fated attempt at combining burnt leather with lye. Spoiler: your gums rejected that experiment with extreme prejudice. Today, you decide to revisit an old favorite, the vinegar honey rinse. It's less a toothpaste than an experience. You mix a spoonful of honey with a splash of cider vinegar and a pinch of dried mint. The mint is mostly symbolic. It never really masks the vinegar. But you like to pretend. You swish it experimentally. It's sharp, it's sweet, it's wildly unpleasant, and yet oddly refreshing. The honey clings to your teeth like syrupy regret, while the vinegar reminds your gums that you are, in fact, still alive. You swish again, spit into a bowl, and dab your chin with a rag. There. Cleanish. Invigorated. Slightly acidic. You once read, or overheard, that early American physicians believed dental pain was a sign of internal heat. Their solution? Cool the system down with cucumbers, river stones, or, if things got truly dire, bloodletting behind the ear. You try not to think about that too hard while holding a spoonful of vinegar. Historians still argue whether such ideas were entirely superstition, or if they had the occasional unintended benefit. After all, putting a cold stone against a swollen jaw probably helped a little. The bleeding? Maybe not so much. It's during these vinegar-swishing moments that your mind wanders to the truly peculiar side of colonial dental lore. There's the tale of the traveling preacher who insisted toothaches were divine punishment for idle speech. He claimed that repentance, public, preferably loud, could halt decay. You're not sure that's how teeth work, but he did draw a good crowd. Then there was the woman from Salem, Rebecca something, who swore by a paste of charcoal, rose petals, and powdered frog bone. The bone part was controversial, but no one questioned her because she had dazzlingly white teeth and a habit of staring just a little too long. Back in your kitchen, you check on the latest batch of homemade powder drying on a slate slab near the hearth. This one's a blend of birch ash, crushed marjoram, and the last of your burnt rye bread. A strange combination, yes, but something about it feels promising. It smells less like medicine and more like desperation wrapped in toast. As you break it up into smaller chunks, you catch a glimpse of your reflection in the window. Your teeth gleam faintly in the muted light. Not bright, not perfect, but present. And really, that's what matters. You smile at yourself, then immediately stop because it tugs on a sore spot, and your jaw audibly clicks. You make a note in the journal. Birch, marjoram, shucked rye blend. Mild, smells edible. Test further. Later, you share a pot of stew with Martha, who's still nursing the raw socket where her molar used to be. She's tried everything. Salt rinses, cold compresses, and one alarming suggestion involving pickled cabbage leaves tucked behind the ear. None of it's worked, but she insists the pain builds character. You nod in sympathy, then offer her a tiny cloth pouch of your powder. She eyes it like it might sprout legs, but accepts it with a smile. "You're the only person I know who can make burnt bread seem medicinal," she says. You beam at the compliment. It's true. There's a sort of strange alchemy to this whole process. A pinch of this, a scoop of that, a prayer to whichever spirit watches over molars. It's not science as future generations will know it, but it's something. A method. A ritual. You offer Martha a rinse of your vinegar tonic. She accepts with the face of someone bracing for impact. After a single swish, she mutters something unprintable and slams the cup down like she's just taken a shot of fire. "Effective," she coughs. It's the best kind of praise. That night, before bed, you add a fresh entry to your book. Martha approves a vinegar blend, possibly out of spite. You brush gently with your birch powder, rinsing carefully, the taste of herbal toast lingering long after the scrub. As you climb into bed, the fire casting lazy shadows on the wall, you let your tongue settle along your teeth. No pain, no bleeding, just a faint taste of vinegar and mint. For now, that's enough. Morning dew clings to the window panes as you pull yourself from the warmth of the blanket. The coals in the hearth, now a gentle glow under ash. Your jaw feels stiff but not sore. A rare and welcome change. You stretch, yawn, and mutter your usual morning thanks that your teeth are still attached to your person, rather than soaking in a jar beside your bed like poor old Mr. Latimer, who greets the sunrise with a gumming motion and a curse. You reach instinctively for your morning rinse. Lukewarm water, pinch of salt, and 2 crushed sage leaves. The salt hits first, bracing and bright. The sage lingers, grassy and faintly bitter. You swish slowly, eyes still half closed, letting the ritual set the rhythm for the day. It's a market day, which means brushing with something slightly more fragrant than usual. You reach for your clove sage powder, stored in a blue ceramic jar that once held pickled onions. The lid sticks as always, sealed by time and humidity. You pry it open with the handle of a spoon, revealing the familiar gray-green mix that smells like a forest after a campfire. This particular blend came from your attempt to mimic a formula recorded by a French apothecary, at least according to the tattered pamphlet you traded for 2 springs ago. It promised clarity of the breath and fortitude of the gums. You can't speak to the clarity, but your gums do feel slightly more fortitudinous these days. Whether from the sage or sheer repetition, it's hard to say. The paste goes on your cloth with the satisfying firmness of something homemade and a little suspicious. You scrub gently, paying extra attention to the upper right molars, the site of your long-term dental Cold War. There's no pain today, only a mild twinge, which you consider a victory. While you brush, your mind wanders to what the wealthier colonists used to clean their teeth. Those in the grander homes often had imports, real toothbrushes with ivory handles and boar bristles, shipped over in neat wooden boxes. Some even had gold-plated toothpicks. You've seen one once, and it looked less like a hygiene tool and more like something to duel with. Wealthier households also had access to prepared tooth powders, sold in glass jars with embossed labels. Dr. Hensley's Parisian powder, or Mrs. Thornwick's dental whiteness paste. The labels were as elaborate as the claims, guaranteed to polish, protect, and perfume. Historians still argue whether these powders were any more effective than the humble ash salt mixes used by common folk, or just more fragrant versions of the same old nonsense. You recall attending a supper in one such wealthy home, where the hostess insisted on offering guests a mint-flavored rinse after the meal. Her own blend, of course, steeped with imported rose petals and a hint of orange peel. It was lovely, and so acidic your tongue tingled for 2 days. You pause your brushing to spit into a small bowl and examine the contents like a 1740s oracle, reading the future in soot and foam. No blood, no alarming colors. A good omen. Market day always draws out the strangest remedies. The peddlers bring powders from Boston, tinctures from Philadelphia, even strange waxy pellets they claim were blessed in Portugal, and can remove tooth pain if chewed during a full moon. You're not superstitious exactly, but you do chew one now and then, just in case. You think about the various folk remedies you've overheard in market chatter. Chewing tobacco for toothache, biting on cloves, and pressing a hot stone to your temple to draw out the humors. You once tried the stone method. It gave you a headache and a slight burn, but did distract you from the original problem. There's also the onion method, favored by the Dutch settlers. Hold a slice of raw onion in your cheek for as long as you can bear. You tried it once. Your breath cleared a room for an hour. Even the cat left. Despite the eccentricity of these treatments, there's a sort of shared creativity among your fellow colonists. Dental care isn't standardized, but it's communal. Everyone has a story, a tip, a warning. You've learned as much from gossip as from any physician. Back in the kitchen, you rinse your mouth with a mug of warm chamomile, the tea left over from last night. It's faint but soothing, and it washes away the last of the clove powder. Your teeth feel slick, your gums tingling in that not unpleasant way that suggests the herbs are doing something, or at least pretending to. You pack your small satchel for the market. 2 pouches of your homemade tooth powder, 1 small jar of dried mint to trade, and a spare cloth for demonstration. There's always someone curious, especially after seeing your reasonably intact smile. As you walk down the lane toward the town square, Your thoughts drift to the way colonial life blends the scientific and the spiritual, especially when it comes to the body. Teeth seem particularly caught in the crossfire. Part bone, part mystery, always just on the brink of failure. Some still believe in the toothworm theory, that decay is caused by a tiny creature burrowing into the tooth. You've heard it whispered in confidence more than once. A neighbor swears she saw one once, wriggling out of her brother's bicuspid like a pale string. Whether it was a nerve or a figment of grief remains unclear. But the image lingers. You arrive at the market just as the morning bell rings, the stalls already bustling with the soft clamor of trade. Apples, linen, herbs, gossip. You settle near the far end, where the remedy sellers tend to gather. Between the man with the questionable leeches and the woman who sells cough syrup that smells suspiciously like mulled wine. You unpack your wares, set out your samples, and prepare to smile, gently, reservedly, molar forward. After all, nothing advertises a tooth powder like teeth that are still standing. Market days are never quiet. You knew that going in. But today, the bustle feels particularly animated. Perhaps it's the mild weather. Perhaps it's the arrival of a new batch of traders from the coast. Or maybe it's just that Mrs. Witherspoon is loudly recounting the tale of how her second cousin's molar exploded clean out of his mouth after a bad dream, and people are gathering as though it's gospel. You're used to background chatter, but even you pause at exploded. You shift your modest display slightly to the left, angling your little jar of birch powder into the sunbeam slicing through the market canopy. A few heads turn. You offer a mild, friendly smile, the sort that says, "Yes, I brush. Yes, I still eat apples. Yes, I've suffered greatly for it." Your first customer is the butcher's apprentice, Joel, barely 16 and already sporting the weary eyes of a man twice his age. He's holding his jaw awkwardly, and you can tell before he says a word. "Toothache. Left side?" you ask gently. He nods and winces. "Feels like a squirrel's chewing on the nerve." You gesture toward the small bowl of sample powder. He dips a finger, rubs some along his gum line, and immediately makes the face of someone experiencing both relief and mild betrayal. "Tingly," he manages. "That's the clove," you reply. "Why's it warm?" "That's also the clove." He hands over a copper penny and a bit of waxed paper for wrapping, then shuffles off, already pressing his jaw in that hopeful way only a desperate person does. It's not just Joel. One after another, townsfolk wander by, curious or pained or simply bored. A young woman whose breath could knock over a goat asks if the powder is husband safe. You assure her it is. A widow asks if it'll make her gums regrow. You pause, then carefully explain that nothing short of divine intervention or a new husband's fortune can do that. Historians still argue whether these kinds of informal dental traders, people like you, played a meaningful role in improving hygiene, or whether they were simply filling a void until proper medicine caught up. You tend to think both can be true. After all, the doctors aren't lining up to discuss tooth powders. They're too busy bleeding people for hiccups. While you work, you listen. The market is the colony's beating heart, and its chatter reveals more than church records ever will. Today's murmurs concern a traveling Dutch dentist who's due to arrive next week. He allegedly carries his own reclining chair and a device that spins. Someone claims he uses ether to numb the pain. Someone else swears he once pulled 7 teeth from a single woman in under 5 minutes. You're skeptical, but intrigued, mostly by the chair. You exchange a small pouch of your night blend, chamomile, sage, and powdered charcoal, for a wedge of hard cheese. The trader tells you his aunt swears by brushing with cheese rinds. You nod politely and make a mental note to write that down in your journal under possibly edible brushes. One stall over, a tall man with a thick accent sells small bundles of fragrant sticks. chewing twigs from the sassafras tree. You've used them yourself in a pinch. Not bad. A bit like cleaning your mouth with licorice and splinters. Still, there's something elegant about their simplicity. No paste, no cloth, just chew and scrub. He offers you one, free of charge. You accept graciously and tuck it into your pouch, planning to test it later, possibly on someone else. The day grows warmer. A sheen of sweat settles at the base of your neck, and your mouth feels dry despite the endless small talk. You swish with a bit of mint water and offer a sample to a nearby farmer who's eyeing your powder with suspicion. "What's it taste like?" he asks. "Hope," you say deadpan. He laughs, tries it, coughs a little, and walks off mumbling something about trying anything once. You find a moment of quiet and watch as a woman with a soft bonnet coaxes her young daughter into rinsing with salt water. The child makes a face like she's being exorcised. You smile. You remember that face. You still make it sometimes. As the afternoon wanes, a teenage boy approaches, awkward and lanky, with the look of someone either about to ask a question or confess a crime. "Is it true," he begins, "that if you sleep with a sprig of thyme under your pillow, your teeth won't rot?" You consider your answer carefully. "Well," you say, "your teeth won't rot because you'll be too scared to eat anything ever again." He thinks this over and, to your surprise, buys a sprig of thyme and a scoop of powder. Another sale. Your final customer of the day is an elderly woman with perfect posture and a glint in her eye that says she doesn't need dental help, but wants to assess yours. She picks up your charcoal blend, sniffs it, and gives a soft hum of approval. "Reminds me of the old London powders," she murmurs. Before the fire, you raise an eyebrow. "The Great Fire," she clarifies, almost wistful. "A lot of excellent dental practices burned up along with everything else." You wrap her pouch in linen, and she thanks you with a nod and a single crisp coin. Silver. You blink. That hasn't happened before. "Good powder deserves good coin," she says simply, and disappears into the crowd. You begin packing your things. The light is shifting, the air cooler. Someone's roasting chestnuts near the square's edge, and the scent floats lazily past as you tighten the cord on your satchel. You feel a dull ache behind your front tooth. Possibly from over-talking, possibly from stress, possibly from daring to think you were having a pain-free day. No matter. Tonight you'll swish with something minty, dab a bit of clove along the gum line, and maybe, just maybe, sleep without dreaming of exploding molars. You return home just as dusk slides into the trees, your footsteps soft against the packed earth of the lane. The day's trade was modest, but satisfying. Enough coin for fresh candles, a wedge of cheese, and perhaps a few sprigs of lavender if Martha's still in a generous mood. Your jaw throbs faintly from all the talking. But it's the good kind of ache. The kind that reminds you you've been useful, maybe even helpful. You let yourself in through the back door, avoiding the loose hinge that shrieks like a banshee with boundary issues, and head straight to the hearth. There's still a bit of heat in the coals, and you add a log, listening as the flames slowly catch. The warmth is immediate and steady, and the familiar crackle fills the silence like an old friend murmuring stories you've heard before, but never tire of. As you hang your cloak and wash your hands, your gaze drifts to the ceramic jar where you keep your older blends. Powders you no longer use but can't quite bring yourself to toss. Some are too gritty, some turned strange colors over time. One smells suspiciously like pickled radish. But they mark your journey, each one a dusty milestone on your path toward a somewhat functional mouth. Tonight, your rinse is simple. Warm water, a pinch of clove, and a sliver of dried orange peel left over from a Yule gift. You let it steep while you unwind, rolling your shoulders, loosening the day from your spine. You rub a bit of camphor oil into your temples, not for any medical reason, just because it smells like old books and snowstorms. Sitting in your favorite chair by the fire, you sip the rinse slowly. It's gentle, with a hint of spice and citrus, and it softens the lingering edge of market fatigue. As you swirl the last of it in your mouth, you consider the state of dental knowledge in the colonies. How much is trial, how much is error, and how much is just folks being stubbornly inventive. You think of Mr. Beasley, the blacksmith, who swears by brushing with iron filings. Keeps the tooth spirits away, he claims, as if spirits are impressed by rust. Then there's young Eliza, who insists on rubbing her teeth with strawberries. Her breath smells lovely, but you suspect her enamel is slowly dissolving in a fruit-scented rebellion. Historians still argue whether colonial folks like yourself really believed in these strange remedies, or simply leaned into them out of desperation, comfort, or the occasional neighborly dare. Probably all three. You step outside for a moment, rinse bowl in hand, and spit into the herbs growing just beyond the stoop. They're hardy, used to such treatment. You're fairly certain the rosemary actually thrives on clove water. You make a mental note to test that theory more scientifically next spring. The stars are out, scattered like sugar on a slate table, and you breathe in the crisp air. It smells of wood smoke, soil, and faintly, inevitably, of someone baking something sweet. Possibly Martha's molasses biscuits. You're torn between admiration and the growing sense that she's doing it just to test you. You head back in, light a second candle, and pull your journal from the shelf. Its cover is scuffed, the corners soft from years of use. You open it to a fresh page and begin to record the day's events. Mark it good. Joel still alive. Tried sassafras stick. Tastes like stubborn licorice. Powder with orange peel promising. Must test on someone fearless. Possibly neighbor's goat. You pause, tapping your quill against your lip. A thought occurs. You haven't yet tried mixing the mint and charcoal blend with vinegar. You jot a note, underline it twice, then draw a little skull with a flower growing out of it. For flair. As the fire settles into its nighttime rhythm, you prepare your final cleaning. A soft cloth, a dab of your bedtime blend, and slow, deliberate circles across your teeth. You hum while you work. An old lullaby from your childhood, something about apples and lanterns, and not stepping on frogs. You rinse again with warm water, spit, and sit back with a satisfied sigh. Your mouth feels fresh. Not quite modern dentist clean, but definitely would survive another day without screaming clean. Which, for the time and place, is high praise indeed. As you lay out your clothes for tomorrow and bank the fire, you think again of all the small, odd tools people use for their teeth. Scrapers made from bone, brushes carved from antler, even tiny dental knives, which sound exciting until you imagine them near your gum line. One particularly eccentric neighbor, Amos the Cooper, uses a little silver hook he claims is modeled after a Roman design. He offered to let you try it once. You declined with great enthusiasm and put 3 feet of table between you and that artifact. Still, there's something admirable in it all. The sheer inventiveness, the resilience, the refusal to go quietly into the toothless night. You dim the lantern, slide into bed, and pull the quilt to your chin. Outside, the wind stirs the trees. Inside, the coals glow faintly. You press your tongue to your teeth, checking for pain, for cracks, for that odd movement that might mean trouble's on its way. All quiet. You smile, then wince slightly. Still, not bad. Morning creeps in like a polite guest, slipping through the shutters and across the floorboards without a sound. You wake slowly, the way one does after a cool night under a thick quilt, unsure whether you're still dreaming or just unusually well-rested. Then your tongue instinctively finds the left back molar, the old enemy, and you're reassured. Reality has returned. There's a dull ache today, but nothing worth worrying about. You've named it Harold. Harold visits often. He's dramatic, but not dangerous. You sit up and stretch, listening as your joints crack in protest. Another day begins. You toss off the covers, wiggle your toes against the cold floor, and pad toward the hearth where yesterday's fire has left a mound of sleepy embers. You poke at them absently while considering what blend to start the morning with. Today feels like a birch day. Simple, smoky, slightly sweet. You scoop a little of the powder from its tin and mix it with a touch of warm water to make a paste. The brush cloth is soft from use, almost threadbare. You consider replacing it, then remember how long it took to make this one just right. Maybe not yet. The brushing is gentle, familiar, rhythmic. You work back and forth, small circles, paying careful attention to the places where Harold tends to throw tantrums. The birch powder is oddly soothing today. You feel like you're polishing old silver that just happens to live in your mouth. As you finish, you rinse with a bit of sage-infused water from the small crock by the door. It's mellow, a little earthy, and leaves a faint, pleasant bitterness. You spit into the herb bed again, offering the mint a morning blessing in your own odd, minty way. You remember hearing once that some colonists believed their teeth could tell fortunes. Supposedly the shape of your molars indicated your character, and loose teeth meant you'd lose money or favor. You're not sure who came up with that, but you suspect they had more superstition than dental training. Still, it's an amusing idea. Imagining your mouth as a miniature oracle, muttering prophecies through cracked enamel and sore gums. Historians still argue whether colonial Americans believed in tooth omens out of genuine conviction or simply as a way to explain pain they didn't understand. After all, when your tooth aches for days and there's no visible reason, blaming it on a cursed pie or a bad moon feels more manageable than accepting you've probably got rot beneath the gum line. You pull on your boots slowly, one at a time, then grab your satchel and step outside. The air is crisp, with the sharp bite of early frost. Your breath fogs slightly as you walk, the leather strap of your satchel creaking faintly with each step. You're headed to Martha's again. She's asked you to help her prepare a new rinse, something gentler this time. Her last experiment involved radish vinegar, and the results were alarming. Her gums turned a concerning shade of mauve. She insists it was invigorating. You suspect it was mildly corrosive. The path to her home winds past the town well, where several women are gathering water and, inevitably, gossip. You nod as you pass, catching fragments of conversation. Someone's cow is missing. Someone's child has a mysterious rash. Someone else is swearing off molasses. You arrive at Martha's to find her already at work in the garden, snipping mint with the air of a woman preparing for battle. Her mouth is pressed into a line so tight, you wonder if she's clenched her teeth since sunrise. "I've been thinking," she says by way of greeting. "Maybe if we steep the mint with crushed fennel seed and just a dash of turpentine." "No," you say, but still no. She sighs and gestures you inside, where a small fire crackles and a pot of water steams on the hearth. You unload your satchel and begin sorting herbs: chamomile, sage, clove, and something new: lavender. You've never used it in a rinse before, but the smell is calming, and you've heard whispers that it soothes inflammation, or maybe just nerves. Together you craft a simple blend: lavender and sage, crushed into a fine powder, then steeped in warm water with a pinch of salt. The color is soft gray, the scent clean and floral, like spring remembering how to be gentle. Martha takes a tentative sip, swishes, swallows by accident, and then shrugs. "Not awful," she concedes. "Tastes like a garden at a funeral." You nod. Soothing but mournful, ideal for bedtime. She grins, and for a moment you forget her gums are still the color of a bruised beet. As the rinse cools, you pull out your journal and make a quick note: lavender, sage, salt. Promising. Martha still alive. Gum color unknown. Monitor. She offers you a heel of bread and a slice of sharp cheese in thanks. And you eat in companionable silence, both of you chewing carefully. The bread is hard, but your teeth hold. Barely. On the walk home, you pass old Mr. Rollins, who's sitting on a stump, fiddling with what looks like a handmade toothpick carved from deer antler. He offers you a slow nod. Loose tooth? He asks. Nope, you say cheerfully. Just brushing. He grunts. Had one fall out in my stew last night. Left it in. You pause. Why? Adds texture, he says. Deadpan. You smile and keep walking. The sun's beginning to lower, casting long, lazy shadows across the road. A breeze carries the scent of damp leaves and wood smoke, and you tug your cloak a little tighter. At home, you tidy the hearth, brush your teeth once more with your bedtime powder, and settle in with your journal. You write slowly, carefully, the ink scratching quietly across the page. No new pain. Harold subdued. Lavender is not terrible. Possible future blend. You pause, then add, teeth still intact, a good day. And with that, you douse the candle, pull the quilt up to your chin, and smile. Carefully, gently, just in case Harold is listening. The first frost of the season greets you with all the subtlety of a slap from a cold washcloth. Your window panes are traced with delicate patterns, frozen lace left behind by the night air. You rise slowly, groaning softly. Not from pain exactly, but from the knowledge that your feet are about to touch a floor that feels like a marble slab in a meat cellar. Your morning ritual begins as always. A stretch, a yawn, and a quick check-in with your molars. Nothing throbs, clicks, or pulses ominously. That's a win. You shuffle towards the hearth, adding a log to the coals with numb fingers, and wait for the warmth to return to the room, like an old friend arriving fashionably late. While the fire reawakens, you head to the table where your jars and pouches of powders live. You examine each one like a librarian checking out a suspicious pile of overdue books. There's the classic birch blend, the stronger sage-clove mix, and that newer one with fennel that you're still deciding whether to fear or embrace. Today, you reach for something comforting, your mint-lavender blend. It's not the most effective, but it tastes like someone patting your cheek gently and saying, "There, there." You sprinkle a bit onto your cloth, dampen it with warm water, and begin your brushing. The powder clings like soot, but the smell is soft and almost dreamy. You think back to when you first tried lavender, expecting nothing more than a faintly floral rinse, and ending up with the most relaxing mouth you'd had in weeks. As you brush, you remember a peculiar theory you once heard from a traveling French herbalist, that certain herbs, when chewed regularly, could realign the humors responsible for dental decay. He claimed to have cured 5 cases of tooth melancholy with a paste of sage, honey, and crushed snail shells. You never tried it. Snails weren't exactly plentiful, and the concept of tooth melancholy raised more questions than answers. Historians still debate whether such theories were purely imaginative or the remnants of older pre-Enlightenment medical systems trying to explain invisible processes with visible ingredients. Whatever the case, the result was the same. Someone tried something odd, and someone else either lost a tooth or gained an anecdote. Your brushing finished, you rinse with warm water and swish thoughtfully. The lavender really is doing something. If not for your teeth, then for your sense of peace. You spit into the herb patch and decide to give yourself a quiet day. No market, no brewing, no teeth-related emergencies. Just rest and a bit of record-keeping. You open your journal, running a finger along the spine, which is fraying again. Inside, the pages are soft with age, slightly wrinkled from splashes and the odd fingerprint of charcoal dust. You begin a new entry, mint lavender holding steady, flavor soothing, may add lemon balm for variety. You consider adding a sketch of a molar wearing a bonnet, then think better of it. This is, after all, a serious book. Later that morning, there's a knock at the door. It's Eliza, the strawberry brusher, with a sheepish smile and both hands cupped around her jaw. "Hurts," she mutters. "Too many strawberries. Again." You nod sagely, the way only someone with at least 3 different types of clove-based paste on hand can. You invite her in, brew a pot of tea, and begin preparing a gentle rinse. Chamomile, sage, a pinch of charcoal. She watches with wide eyes as you work, occasionally flinching as she touches her swollen cheek. You hand her the cup, and she sips carefully. Her face tightens, then relaxes. "Better," she says. "Still awful, but better." You smile. It's the closest thing to a professional endorsement you've had all week. As she rests near the fire, you gently examine the troublesome tooth with a sliver of rounded wood. No movement, thank goodness. Just redness and a warning from her gums to try literally any other fruit next time. While she swishes, you tell her about the peculiar tooth keys some dentists use. Curved metal devices resembling torture instruments, designed to grip and yank out teeth with as much elegance as one might pull a nail from wood. Eliza blanches, gripping her cup tighter. You quickly switch to the topic of soft bristles and baking soda. Historians still argue about the tooth key's origin. Some say it began as a watchmaker's tool repurposed in desperation. Others trace it to ancient surgical kits. What they don't argue about is the pain. Tooth keys were swift, brutal, and about as gentle as being kicked by a mule wearing spurs. You and Eliza agree that her rinse is doing enough for now, and that perhaps a more neutral berry is in order. Gooseberries, maybe. Or better yet, none at all. By the time she leaves, the sun is slipping toward the treetops, and your stomach reminds you it exists. You slice a small apple, chew carefully, and feel a twinge in your left molar. Not Harold, someone new. A visiting cousin, perhaps. You decide not to name this one unless it sticks around. As you clean up, your thoughts turn to the strange line between care and hope. So much of colonial dental practice relies on the belief that what you're doing might help. There's no assurance, no guarantees, just a quiet trust in plants, powders, and persistence. You close the journal for the day and bank the fire. Outside, the frost has returned, dusting the garden with silver and turning the herbs brittle beneath the stars. You brush your teeth again. Same mint lavender blend, same slow circles, same moment where you pause to see if the pain is better, worse, or simply hiding. It's bearable. You rinse, spit, and whisper goodnight to the rosemary, because if it's listening, it deserves to feel appreciated. The morning air feels thinner today, as if the sky forgot to fully warm itself. You sit wrapped in your shawl, sipping a tepid herbal infusion and eyeing the frost patterns on your windows like they might reveal your fortune. No birds are singing yet, just the muffled groan of the old beams above you and the occasional creak from your knees, as though the two are in conversation. Your mouth feels odd. Not painful, exactly, but like someone rearranged the furniture while you were asleep. You prod gently with your tongue. The culprit appears to be a back molar, a familiar sight of quiet rebellion. You sigh, grab your cloth and powder, and begin the ritual brushing with the resigned patience of a parent cleaning up after a particularly artistic toddler. You use your gentlest blend today. Sage, charcoal, and a touch of mint. It's your go-to for mornings like this, when you want to feel clean without waking the sleeping bear that is your lower jaw. The cloth moves in soft, practiced motions, and you hum absently, trying not to imagine the molar tipping like a rotting fence post. As you brush, you remember a conversation you once had with a school teacher who swore that toothaches were more common during full moons. She kept a little notebook of every ache, every lunar phase, and claimed to have cracked some kind of celestial dental code. Historians still argue whether such observations were based in any scientific pattern or were merely coincidence dressed in poetic logic. You suspect the latter, but admire her commitment. You rinse with tepid chamomile and spit into the basil pot, which you're fairly sure has developed a subtle taste of clove over the past few weeks. Not unpleasant, just suspicious. You sit at your writing table, sunlight beginning to warm the edges of your journal. You flip to a clean page and write, "Back molar unstable, possibly staging a coup. Tried to negotiate with Mint, monitoring." You sketch a tiny, wobbling tooth with a bandana and sword. It's not helpful, but it's emotionally satisfying. Mid-morning brings a knock on the door. Twice, then a pause, then a third knock. Slower. That rhythm could only belong to old Mr. Templeton, who's 83, mostly deaf, and convinced his teeth are held in place by moral strength alone. You open the door, and he stares at you solemnly, holding out a pouch of brownish powder. "Found this in my attic," he grumbles. "Says dental dust of Edinburgh. Figure you'd know if it's poison." You accept the pouch like it might contain a sleeping snake. The label is faded, written in looping script, promising to restore youth, vitality, and enamel. It smells faintly of nutmeg and something more medicinal, perhaps myrrh or wishful thinking. Templeton sits by the fire while you inspect the contents. "Used it once," he mutters. "Tasted like cinnamon and regret." "Did it work?" you ask. He shrugs. "Didn't die." You make a note of the blend, carefully wrapping it back up. You might test it on a chipped cup first. Templeton dozes for a bit, and you sit quietly, watching the steam curl from the mug of tea beside him. His breathing is slow, content. He's one of the few in town who still has most of his own teeth, though he claims at least 2 of them were swapped with a neighbor in a bartering mishap during his youth. You've never pressed for details. After he leaves, you take a walk to clear your head. The path is dusted with frost, crunching underfoot. You spot Martha in her garden, shaking a bottle of her latest concoction, something purple and vaguely ominous. She waves. You wave back with the wariness of someone who still remembers the radish vinegar incident. Down by the mill, a group of children are daring each other to bite into cold apples. One squeals, holding her jaw and laughing. Another bites clean through and looks smug for a full 5 seconds before wincing dramatically. You remember that kind of bravado, when losing a tooth felt like a badge of honor, not a sign of your body quietly abandoning you. Historians still puzzle over how colonial children fared with their dental health compared to adults. Some records suggest their teeth were stronger, perhaps due to less sugar early on. Others believe they just didn't live long enough for decay to catch up. Either way, they weren't brushing with mint lavender paste or cataloging symptoms with feather quills. Back home, you mix a fresh blend, inspired by Templeton's Edinburgh dust. You try cinnamon, nutmeg, and a trace of sage. The smell is nostalgic, spicy, warm, and slightly medicinal. You test a dab on your cloth and give it a cautious go. It burns, pleasantly, like waking up with purpose. You rinse, grin into the polished kettle hanging over the hearth, and marvel at how something so small, a mix of powders, a scrap of cloth, can make you feel just slightly more prepared for the day. That evening, you record the experiment in your journal. Edinburgh blend spicy. Possibly effective, possibly insane. Would not recommend to children or cowards. You draw a small flame next to a smiling tooth. Before bed, you swish with sage water, tuck your shawl around your shoulders, and sit quietly by the fire. Outside, the wind picks up. tapping on the shutters like an impatient guest. You close your eyes and lean back, letting your mind drift. Your molar still aches, but not loudly. Tonight, it murmurs instead of shouting. A small victory. You wake to a curious silence. No birds, no wind, no creaking from the eaves. Just the muffled hush of snowfall, soft and complete, like the world decided to wrap itself in wool and pause for a moment. You rise slowly, not from stiffness this time, but reverence. Snow this early is a quiet surprise, and you treat it accordingly. You brush off the windowsill to get a better view. The garden is hidden beneath a smooth white blanket, herbs tucked in like sleeping children. Your old boots leave the only prints along the path to the woodshed. Even the air feels different. Cleaner, as if filtered through muslin and peppermint. Your mouth is dry, though, and your teeth feel vaguely sour, as though they disapprove of you sleeping so well. You grimace and go to your work table, lighting a small candle to chase off the dimness. The mint-sage blend feels like the right choice this morning. Cool, bracing, like a polite slap from a friendly snowman. You work the paste into your cloth and begin brushing, each stroke familiar and deliberate. There's no rush. Snow slows everything. Time, thought, even tooth pain. The ache from yesterday has softened into a dull throb, barely worth mentioning. You give it a name anyway. Mildred. She feels like a Mildred. Persistent, opinionated, but ultimately harmless. As you rinse, you're reminded of a strange pamphlet you once saw in a traveling merchant's bundle. It claimed that drinking cold water after brushing would seal the cleanliness in, like wax on a letter. You tried it once. Your teeth hurt for an hour. Never again. Historians still argue whether such folk beliefs served more as social habits than real medical practices. Routines passed down like recipes, meant to provide a sense of control in a world full of uncertain aches and inconvenient molars. You journal briefly before breakfast. Mildred awake but quiet. Snow calming, brushed with sage mint. No complaints. Then beside it, do not drink cold water after brushing. Reminder, today you've promised to visit the widow Phelps. She claims her lower jaw has begun clicking like a sewing machine possessed. You suspect a misaligned molar, or perhaps she's just grinding her teeth every time her nephew speaks, which, to be fair, is often. You pack your satchel with several blends, including a new one you've been tinkering with. Clove, mint, and a tiny dash of ground rose petal. It's not entirely practical, but the scent is divine, and sometimes that's half the battle. The snow makes travel slow. Your boots sink with each step, and the world feels muffled, dreamlike. Along the way, you spot Mr. Templeton again, now using a walking stick with a carved wolf's head on top. He claims it's to ward off tooth spirits. You nod solemnly and move on. At the widow's, the fire is roaring, and the tea is already steeping. She greets you with a dramatic sigh and a hand to her jaw. It moves, she whispers. Every time I yawn, I'm certain it's shifting. You examine her carefully, coaxing her to open her mouth, tilt her head, press gently along her cheekbones. She flinches once, twice, then sneezes. You flinch. Once the moment passes, you have her try a warm rinse, chamomile and clove with a bit of cinnamon. She swishes, glares at the cup like it insulted her, and declares, "Better, slightly." You take this as a triumph. While she rests, you look through a small drawer she keeps of old remedies, scraps of paper with recipes, some more legible than others. One suggests using burnt eggshells and vinegar to bind wobbly teeth. Another involves salt and goose fat. You admire the creativity, if not the results. Historians still debate whether such household remedies were born of desperation or true empirical testing. You suspect a bit of both. If something worked once, by chance or not, it was remembered, shared, and usually modified by someone who swore they could improve it with horseradish. Before you leave, the widow offers you a handful of dried lemon peel. "Try that in a blend," she says. Tastes like stubbornness. You thank her and step back into the snow, the wind now picking up, tugging at your cloak like a curious child. You hurry home, cheeks red, teeth clenched, not from pain, but from the cold that seems determined to freeze your tongue. Back inside, you thaw your hands by the fire, add the lemon peel to your work table, and jot a note. Possible citrus blend? Add to test journal, maybe with rosemary. Dinner is soft bread and warm broth. Nothing to challenge Mildred, who remains mercifully quiet. You brush again with a clove-sage paste, letting the flavors linger like a gentle lullaby for your gums. You pause, smile faintly, and imagine a world where everyone has a dedicated tooth diary. A strange vision, but not without merit. You'd certainly have fewer repeat mistakes, fewer failed combinations, fewer memories of brushing with something that turned out to be powdered peppercorn. As you settle into bed, the wind howls against the shutters. The fire burns low. Your jaw is quiet. Your gums feel clean, unbothered. Even Mildred seems to have fallen asleep. You whisper a thank you to no one in particular, pull the quilt up to your chin, and let the hush of snow carry you toward dreams. You're awoken not by a rooster or morning sun, but by a rhythmic tapping from the roof. Melting snow dripping steadily onto the wooden eaves. It's a pleasant sound, almost like a lullaby on repeat, though one you wouldn't mind hearing from under the quilt rather than outside of it. Still, nature insists. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, and as your feet meet the floor, your jaw sends a small message. Nothing alarming, just a gentle nudge. A reminder. Hello, still here. You reach up and press your fingers along your cheek, mapping the familiar territory. No swelling, no sharpness, just that mild tightness in the hinge that tends to visit when the weather changes. You shuffle over to the hearth and stoke the fire, coaxing the flames back into motion like a baker waking stubborn dough. As the room begins to warm, you turn to your small shelf of jars and pouches. The new addition, the lemon peel gifted by the widow Phelps, still sits in its wrapping, smelling faintly of sunshine and antique linens. Today feels like the right day to test it. You grind a bit of the peel into your usual blend of mint and charcoal. The result is a dusky powder with bright golden flecks and a scent that's oddly cheerful. Minty and clean, but with a zesty, mischievous edge. You dip your cloth into warm water, gather the mixture, and begin brushing. The flavor is curious. The mint cools, the charcoal grounds it, and the lemon lifts it all like a curtain in a summer breeze. You smile despite yourself. Mildred, your back molar, responds with dignified silence. Encouraging. As you rinse with warm rosemary water, you recall a curious anecdote from a passing sailor. He claimed sailors used to chew citrus peels not just for scurvy prevention, but to freshen breath after long nights on deck filled with fish, pipe smoke, and regret. Whether it worked is anyone's guess, but historians still argue whether such habits contributed more to oral health or simply helped mask deeper dental decay beneath the illusion of citrusy bravado. You make a note in your journal. Lemon mint charcoal blend promising. Flavor bright. We'll test again after midday stew. The stew in question is already simmering. Onions, barley, and the last of the smoked root vegetables from your cellar. It's not exactly a dental challenge, but it's hearty, and you know better than to test a new blend on an empty stomach. While it cooks, you sit at your work table and examine your brushes. One has begun to fray beyond usefulness, its soft linen edges worn thin from daily scrubbing. You start a new one with fabric from an old nightshirt, weaving the fibers tightly, smoothing the edges with beeswax. It's a small, quiet task, but satisfying in the way most repetitive things are. The brush begins to take shape, humble and practical. A knock at the door pulls you from your rhythm. It's young Tobias, red-cheeked and holding his jaw like a man 3 times his age. "Loose tooth," he mumbles. "Wiggles when I breathe." You usher him in, seat him by the fire, and offer a bit of warm clove rinse. He winces, swishes, and spits into the basin with the theatrical flair only a 10-year-old can summon. "It tastes like the time I licked the church railing," he declares. You try not to laugh. You fail. A quick look reveals the culprit. A baby tooth, ready to fall with the next sneeze. You tell him gently that no treatment is needed, that this is a sign of growing older. He looks skeptical, as if you've just suggested he grow gills. Still, he thanks you and leaves with a ginger biscuit and a promise to write about it in his own journal. "For historical purposes," he says solemnly. You return to your notes and jot down, "Tobias, 1 tooth lost, 1 ginger biscuit gained. Add cinnamon to next rinse attempt." Your stew is ready by midday. You eat slowly, carefully, paying attention to every bite. Mildred stays quiet. The lemon blend has left your mouth pleasantly fresh, and the food tastes brighter somehow, as if seasoned with sunshine. You walk into the village later to collect a parcel of dried herbs, and along the way you pass an old sign nailed to a crooked post. "Tooth extraction 3 pence. Clean knife, probably." It's been there for years, faded but still legible. You wonder if anyone's ever taken the offer, or if it's just village humor at its darkest. Historians still debate the prevalence of such informal surgery, whether self-appointed tooth pullers were common or merely local legends inflated by fear and anecdote. You hope it's the latter. A clean knife, probably, does little to inspire confidence. That evening, you try the lemon blend one more time, this time without the mint, just charcoal and citrus. The result is tolerable, but less refreshing. Mint, it turns out, is the friend that makes everyone else more charming. You write, "Lemon best in company, mint essential. Will avoid solo citrus in future." Your journal now smells faintly of a dental apothecary and a spice rack. You imagine future generations finding it and wondering what strange person cataloged their every brushing. You smile and close the book. The sky outside has turned the color of pewter. Snow flurries dance against the windows. Inside, your hearth glows warmly. Your teeth feel clean. Your pain is minimal. And your lemon experiment has earned a cautious gold star. You climb into bed, quilt pulled high, and listen to the slow patter of snow resuming its quiet symphony on the roof. Somewhere in the back of your mouth, Mildred exhales and settles in. Morning arrives like a slow drip from the eaves, steady, unobtrusive, and mildly insistent. You wake to a faint hum in your teeth, as though your molars are tuning up for a small private concert. Not pain exactly, just resonance. Perhaps they're responding to the weather, or to yesterday's lemon experiment, or to the looming presence of salted cabbage in your pantry. Hard to say. You stretch, crack your neck gently to one side, then the other, and sigh. Another day. Another set of teeth to clean, inspect, and appease. Your jaw feels slightly tight on the left today. Not a new sensation, but enough to warrant a change of pace. You skip the mint entirely, too stimulating, and instead reach for the lavender charcoal blend. Calming, simple, vaguely floral, like brushing your teeth with a very polite ghost. You dab your cloth in warm water, then into the powder, and begin the slow, circular motion you've developed over years of trial, error, and minor regrets. It's not just about cleaning anymore, it's about noticing, checking in, listening to what your mouth has to say, even if all it wants to do is complain in subtle clicks and throbs. As you brush, you recall a curious story told by the town's retired midwife, Agnes. She swore that in her younger days, she had assisted with the birth of a child who emerged with a full set of teeth. Biting from the cradle, she'd said with a mix of pride and horror. Whether this was true or just another fireside tale is unclear. Historians still argue whether such accounts are exaggerations, folklore, or rare cases of neonatal teeth. Real, but not as terrifying as Agnes made them sound. You rinse with lukewarm rosehip water, spit into the garden pot, and jot down a note in your ever-thickening journal. Tension left jaw. Lavender blend acceptable. No mint until further notice. Beside it, you add, possible research. Infants born with teeth. Myth or misfortune. The sun peeks through the shutters as you prepare breakfast. Soft bread with a smear of apple preserve. You chew slowly, mindfully. The tension remains, but doesn't worsen. You take that as a gesture of goodwill from your jaw. After breakfast, you take inventory of your dental supplies. The rosemary is low. The charcoal needs grinding. The mint has dried out completely and crumbles like ancient parchment. You decide a replenishment trip is in order. You wrap yourself in layers, pack a basket, and head out toward the village apothecary. The snow has mostly melted, leaving behind the kind of damp, muddy roads that test the loyalty of your boots. Along the way, you pass a group of children attempting to build a snowman, but lacking enough snow, they've substituted with mud, sticks, and what appears to be half a carrot. You pause to admire their determination. The apothecary, run by a man named Jonas, who looks perpetually surprised by his own existence, greets you with a wave. "Back for more tooth dirt?" he asks. "Flavored grit," you correct, smiling. He gestures to a shelf lined with jars. Cloves, dried mint, licorice root, powdered myrrh. The usual suspects. You gather what you need, pausing to inspect a small container labeled red root bark. Jonas claims it was once chewed by tribal healers for both oral health and spiritual clarity. Historians still debate the accuracy of that claim, though modern practitioners agree it may have antibacterial properties. You buy a small amount, curiosity trumps frugality today, and pack it carefully. On your way out, Jonas hands you a folded paper with a smirk. "Someone left this in the herb bin. Thought it might be your kind of strange." It's a handwritten recipe for tooth oil of the moon, promising alignment of jaw and soul. The ingredients include clove, mint, opossum fat, and 3 drops of moonlight. You laugh, tuck it into your basket, and make a note to not attempt that before dinner. Back home, you spread out your supplies like a medieval alchemist preparing for a very specific spell. You mix a new batch, charcoal, lavender, and a pinch of red root. The smell is earthy and soothing, with an undercurrent of something sharp. Promising. You try it. The texture is grainy, the flavor bold, the aftertaste a bit strange, but not unpleasant. It feels like a blend that knows what it's doing, a blend that has opinions. You sit near the fire, recording Red Root Edition notable. Possible anti-inflammatory effects? Further testing required. Flavors holding. Then, almost as an afterthought, avoid opossum fat for now. Your evening meal is simple. Porridge with honey and a small wedge of cheese. The tension in your jaw has lessened, though it's still there, humming like an unattended kettle. You take that as encouragement rather than warning. Before bed, you brush again with the new blend, slower this time. Each motion is a meditation, a thank you, a warning, a quiet spell of protection cast nightly in charcoal and herb. You rinse, spit, and press your fingers gently to your cheeks, massaging the muscles. They feel tired, but not rebellious. Mildred stays quiet. The ghost of Harold lingers in the back molar, perhaps just to keep tabs. The candlelight flickers. Your quilt awaits. You jot one last note. Body is calm, mouth is clean, jaw is mostly cooperative. Tomorrow, test licorice root. You close the journal. The fire sighs low in the hearth. The world outside is silent again. You climb into bed, and for the first time in days, your mouth has nothing to say. The light this morning is soft and blue, the kind of hue that makes everything feel wrapped in linen. You wake slowly, stretching under the heavy quilt. And for a moment, just a moment, you believe you might be entirely pain-free. Then Mildred stirs. It's not a dramatic uprising, just a dull tap from your upper molar, as if she's reminding you she hasn't packed her bags just yet. You nod solemnly at the ceiling, accepting the terms of her continued tenancy, and swing your legs out of bed. Your feet hit the floor with a faint thud, and the chill of the planks makes you move a little faster than usual. At the wash basin, you rinse your mouth with warm water and stretch your jaw gently from side to side. It pops once, but doesn't scream. That's a victory. Today is a licorice root day. You grind the dried root into a fine powder, mix it with a pinch of charcoal and just a breath of clove. The result is an earthy, slightly sweet-smelling blend that reminds you faintly of old wooden toys and honey gone just a little too dark. You dip your cloth, dampen it, and begin your brushing. The flavor is oddly pleasant, mild, rich, and slightly numbing. It reminds you of old-fashioned candies given out by a traveling peddler years ago who claimed they would bless your teeth and curse your enemies. He disappeared the next day, possibly a dentist. Historians still argue whether licorice root was used consistently in early American oral hygiene, or whether it was simply chewed recreationally and later assumed to be medicinal. You'd wager it did both. Like many herbs, it wore several hats depending on the weather, the ailment, and the creativity of the user. You rinse with warm chamomile water and spit into the rosemary pot, which you now refer to as the spittoon garden. It seems to be thriving. You take a moment to document the experiment. Licorice root blend successful. Mild numbing effect. Pleasant taste. Gums seem relaxed. Then, underlined, monitor effects through dinner. Avoid vinegar. You wrap yourself in a shawl and sit near the hearth, sipping weak tea and reviewing your notes from the week. So many combinations. So many little aches and odd flavors. It's starting to look more like a cookbook than a medical log. Outside, snow has melted into slick puddles and muddy slush. Not an ideal day for a walk, but you promise to bring a fresh bundle of mint to Martha, who claims hers has gone sour from all the teeth talk. You tuck the herbs into a cloth bundle, grab your boots, and head out. The village is quiet this time of morning. Just a few carts rattling over the wet road and the occasional whinny from the stable. You pass the bakery, inhale the scent of warm bread, and feel a tug in your molars. Not pain, just hunger. Martha is waiting by her gate, wrapped in 3 shawls and wielding a small brass spoon like a scepter. "Tried my own rinse," she announces. "Cayenne and orange peel. It worked, but now my tongue is furious." You nod sympathetically and hand her the mint. She offers you a boiled sweet in exchange, which you tuck into your pocket for later. Probably much later. Back home, you grind more charcoal, replenish your linen cloth strips, and prepare a small pouch for travel, just in case you're ever invited to another winter gathering and want to impress someone with your selection of personal tooth powders. Not likely, but you never know. That afternoon, you attempt another experiment. Warm licorice tea, lightly salted, as a rinse. It's mild, soothing, and gives your tongue the curious sensation of being very clean, but slightly confused. You note, licorice tea rinse viable, salt optional, avoid strong foods after, flavors linger oddly. Dinner is a soft lentil mash with broth-soaked bread. Mildred remains silent, though you get a tiny twitch from Harold's old corner when you bite into a peppercorn by mistake. You apologize aloud. No one responds. As the fire burns down, you prepare your evening blend: licorice, charcoal, and a bit of lavender. It's gentle, comforting, the dental equivalent of being tucked into bed by someone with warm hands and no judgment. As you brush, your mind drifts to a book you once read, something about ancient Babylonian dentistry. The image that stayed with you wasn't the tools or the herbs, but the idea of using incantations to treat toothaches. One charm described the tooth worm that gnawed at the root, demanding sweets and sewing pain. The treatment? A recitation and a rinse of beer and crushed herbs. Historians still debate whether people truly believed in tooth worms or used them as a metaphor for decay they couldn't otherwise explain. You rather like the idea. It's more poetic than plaque. You finish your brushing, rinse, and jot your final note for the night. Licorice and lavender soixon, soothing. Will repeat tomorrow. No toothworms observed. You smile, light your bedside candle, and climb into bed with the satisfaction of someone who has tended a very small, very specific garden of the body. Outside, the wind picks up again, rustling bare branches against the side of the house. But inside, all is warm. Your teeth are clean. Your mouth is calm. And for the first time all week, no one inside your gums is muttering threats. You close your eyes and let the rhythm of the wind lull you toward sleep. Your molars humming faintly, perhaps in harmony this time. The morning light is a pale gray, diffused through heavy clouds that seem unsure about whether to snow or sulk. You lie still for a moment, listening to the quiet. No drips, no birds, just the soft creak of the beams above you and the faint pulse of your own jaw. You test your bite with a subtle shift. No new aches. Mildred remains in her corner, contemplative. Harold, too, seems content to snooze another day away. A rare moment of peace in the province of your mouth. You rise, pad softly to the hearth, and stir the embers into a flame. The kettle hums as it warms. Today feels like a cinnamon day, bold enough to wake you, gentle enough to soothe. You gather your tools, a fresh cloth, warm water, and your latest blend. Licorice root, charcoal, a pinch of cinnamon, and just a whisper of lavender. As you brush, the flavor is comforting, like the memory of spiced cider or the scent of well-worn recipe pages. The charcoal grounds the sweetness, keeps it humble. The lavender lingers faintly, reminding you to slow down. Each stroke is deliberate. The kind of brushing you do not just to clean, but to feel like you have control over something. You rinse with warm rosemary tea, swish it thoughtfully, and spit into the garden pot. The rosemary, you note, seems to be doing remarkably well, despite being used as a frequent dental dumping ground. You write in your journal, charcoal licorice cinnamon blend, smooth, warming. No protest from Mildred. Lavender helps. Rinse pleasant. Then, consider testing myrrh again. Pair with mint next time. Your day ahead is quiet. No appointments, no social obligations. Just a bit of chopping wood, checking pantry stocks, and possibly reorganizing your herb drawer, which has, frankly, become more chaotic than dignified. As you sort through your supplies, you find an old pouch of powdered myrrh tucked behind a jar of dried rose petals. The smell is earthy, sharp, and just a bit medicinal, like ancient tree bark with ambitions of becoming incense. You recall using it early on in your tooth powder experiments, but retiring it due to its bitter bite. Today, though, you wonder if it might shine in the right company. Historians still discuss the use of myrrh across ancient cultures, not just in burial rituals, but in oral care, especially in Egyptian and Greek records. Whether its inclusion was due to genuine antiseptic properties or because it made one's breath smell faintly like a temple remains an open question. Either way, you're intrigued. You mix a small amount, myrrh, mint, and a touch of sage, and set it aside for evening use. For now, you make yourself a warm bowl of oat porridge with a drizzle of honey and eat slowly, thinking about gums and gums alone. Midday brings a letter, rare and curious. It's from your cousin Eloise, who has recently moved to the coast and claims to be experimenting with seawater rinses. Astringent and bracing, she writes, but one must time it carefully to avoid the barnacles. You have questions. You pen a reply, warning her of oversalination and recommending she try a rinse of fennel and licorice root instead. You include a sketch of your latest blend and a gentle reminder to avoid letting fish nibble on her toes while she brushes. Eloise appreciates your humor, or pretends to. In the late afternoon, you head outside to gather dried pine needles. You've read they were once chewed by certain northern tribes for vitamin C and fresh breath. You pluck a small bundle, crush one between your fingers, and inhale the resinous scent. It smells like winter and old secrets. Back inside, you test a pine needle infusion, not as a powder, but as a warm rinse. The flavor is subtle, slightly bitter, with a citrusy undertone. Not unpleasant, possibly useful. You note, pine needle rinse, interesting. Pair with lemon or mint next. Scent lingers on breath. Dinner is soft beans and spiced squash, with a side of cornbread so dense it could be mistaken for a building material. You chew slowly, paying close attention. Harold stirs once but quickly settles again. Mildred hums, but faintly, like a memory of pain more than the real thing. You rinse with the pine needle blend again, cool and slightly tannic. Then you prepare for your nightly brushing. This time it's the myrrh-mint-sage combination. The flavor is strong, but not unkind. The bitterness of the myrrh is softened by the cool mint and the grounding calm of sage. You brush slowly, carefully, thinking not just of cleanliness, but of ceremony. This is not a chore. This is a rite, a way to tell your mouth, you matter. You are noticed, you are safe. You spit into the rosemary pot, now gloriously overgrown, and sit down to write. Myrrh blend strong but effective. Flavor bold. Breath smells like philosophy. You smile, then add, pine needle rinse viable. May try in travel kit. Cousin possibly turning into a mermaid. The fire crackles. The house is quiet. You finish your tea, brush a final time with plain warm water, and press a warm cloth to your cheeks, just for the comfort of it. Tonight, your jaw is still. Mildred remains respectfully silent. Harold is either asleep or planning something. Either way, he's not complaining. You climb into bed, tuck your journal under your pillow like a talisman, and lie still beneath the quilt. The wind outside rises slightly, shaking the shutters just enough to remind you it's there. But inside, everything is soft, warm, clean. You whisper a good night to your molars, because at this point it would be rude not to, and close your eyes. Sleep comes slowly, but it comes kindly. The day starts with a thud. Not from inside your mouth, thankfully, but from outside. The unmistakable sound of snow sliding off the roof and landing in a graceless heap against your porch steps. You blink awake, startled, and immediately test your jaw with the cautious optimism of someone checking whether a raccoon has moved out of their attic. So far, so good. You sit up slowly, feeling the tug of sleep along your shoulders. No sudden pangs, no rebellious twinges. Even Mildred seems to be on holiday. You breathe in deeply and smile to yourself. A rare and precious morning. Neutral jaw, quiet gums, and a sense of possibility. You light a small candle, warm your hands over it, and begin your morning ritual. Today's blend is familiar. Mint, charcoal, and a sprinkle of sage. You're not experimenting, not seeking adventure. Just something steady and dependable, like an old friend who brings their own tea. You brush slowly, savoring the cool tingle of the mint as it dances along your tongue. The charcoal's gentle grit scrubs quietly, almost apologetically. Sage lingers like a distant memory of something herbaceous and wise. You rinse with warm mint water, spit into the rosemary bush, and breathe deeply. You jot a quick entry. Mint charcoal sage, simple, effective, jaw calm, maybe temporary, remain vigilant. Outside, the world is dripping. Melting snow slides from every rooftop, forming puddles and tiny rivers that trickle through the dirt roads. It's the kind of day that ruins shoes and tempts you to stay indoors. But you've been invited, no, summoned, to visit with old Mrs. Farnsworth, who insists she has a story too important for your molars to miss. You bundle yourself in layers, pack your satchel with a few sample blends, and step carefully onto the slush-covered path. Each footstep is a squelch, each breath a puff of visible air. As you walk, you reflect on how many remedies, stories, and superstitions have been built around the teeth. Not just for health, but for fate, for love, even for luck. Historians still puzzle over tooth-related charms found in some colonial households, bits of molars wrapped in cloth, tucked behind beams, or tied with string and hung in doorways. Were they for protection? Fertility? Dental vengeance? The theories are endless. The proof, as always, depends on which scholar you ask. Mrs. Farnsworth lives in a squat, ivy-covered cottage that smells of vinegar and dried roses. She greets you with a toothless grin and ushers you inside with a hand wave that feels more spell than gesture. "I had a dream," she declares, "about a tooth made of glass, and I think it means something." You sit, nodding gravely, as she explains that in the dream, the glass tooth shattered the moment it was used to bite into a plum. There was no pain, just a strange, humming song. You sip weak lemon tea while she interprets her vision. She believes it's a sign to try your new pine needle rinse. You're not sure how she knows about it. You leave an hour later, slightly bewildered, with a sprig of lavender and a folded page of dream notes in your pocket. You add it to your growing collection of tooth folklore and begin the slow walk home, avoiding puddles that appear deeper than they should be. At your work table, you record Farnsworth Tooth Dream. Add to lore collection. Glass tooth, twasker, fragile knowledge, or just bad sleep? Revisit pine needle rinse tonight. Compare to mint. You prepare a fresh batch. Pine needle infusion with a few drops of lemon and a pinch of salt. The scent is brisk and forest-like, with a crisp edge that wakes the sinuses. You swish it gently, feeling the tannins grip the inside of your cheeks before releasing. Refreshing, but slightly sharp. You make a note to dilute it before sharing. Dinner is roasted parsnips and barley with warm goat's cheese. A meal chosen for its chewability, though the parsnips offer a small surprise or two in the form of caramelized edges that snap like tiny branches. Harold stirs once. Mildred does not. After your meal, you sit by the hearth and prepare your nightly brushing blend. Mint, myrrh, and a sprinkle of lemon peel. A nod to yesterday's experiments, but with a citrus twist. The flavor is bold, clean, and just a little mischievous. As you brush, your thoughts drift back to Mrs. Farnsworth and her glass tooth. It lingers in your imagination. A delicate, translucent molar, capable of cutting through fruit and singing while it breaks. You decide you'll sketch it tomorrow. Perhaps include it in your growing field guide of unlikely dental histories. Historians still debate the meaning behind dream teeth. In some traditions, losing a tooth in a dream meant a death in the family. In others, it meant new beginnings, or perhaps just indigestion. The ambiguity is oddly comforting. After all, even real teeth rarely explain themselves. You rinse, press a warm cloth to your cheeks, and sit back with your journal. Evening blend effective. Myrrh mellowed by citrus. Mouth feels clean, bold, slight tingle. Pine rinse sharp. Dilute further. Glass tooth sketch pending. You add a final line, smiling. Rosemary looking smug, needs trimming. The wind picks up as you climb into bed. You tuck the quilt beneath your chin and feel your jaw settle into stillness. Your molars, it seems, have decided to behave. At least for now. You whisper a thank you to the herbs, the charcoal, the strange old dreams, and close your eyes, drifting toward sleep with the faint taste of mint and mystery on your tongue. You wake slowly, as if surfacing from the depths of a warm, honey-thick dream. The room is still, the quilt heavy on your chest. And for a moment, there's nothing but silence. No creaks, no wind, no whispered protests from your molars. You blink at the ceiling, half expecting Harold to throb out a groggy good morning or for Mildred to tap rudely against your gum. But no. Peace. A rare, luxurious quiet inside your jaw. You sit up cautiously, running your tongue across your teeth like a commander inspecting the troops. All present. All accounted for. No uprisings. You pad softly to the hearth, where the fire has faded into a sulky pile of embers. You coax it back to life, grateful for the warmth as the first fingers of light sneak through the shutters. Today feels like a reflection day. You've spent so many weeks testing, mixing, brushing, and recording, building an apothecary of powders and pastes and rinses that could rival any traveling dentist's kit. You decide it's time to review. You gather your journal, your boxes of dried herbs, your jars of odd-smelling dust, and your growing library of homemade blends. There's something comforting about the clutter. Each item a story, a memory, a small war fought between tooth and time. As you sip a warm infusion of mint and lavender, you flip through the pages of your journal. Notes, sketches, laughably bad first attempts, and surprisingly elegant pairings. You find yourself smiling at the entry about the fennel honey blend that made your mouth smell like a bakery, and the clove and birch paste that accidentally numbed half your face. An unfortunate but strangely pleasant day. You pause over the drawing of Mrs. Farnsworth's glass tooth. It gleams on the page, delicate and strange. You still don't know what it means, but it's lodged in your imagination like a song you can't quite hum. You write, reflection day, no brushing yet. Journal review, blends compared. Mildred silent. Harold unbothered. Strange but welcome. Later, you step outside, wrapped in a thick shawl. The snow is nearly gone, leaving behind damp earth and patches of stubborn frost. The village is quiet, but you spot a few neighbors beginning their spring chores, mending fences, digging compost, eyeing roof repairs with theatrical dread. You stop by the rosemary bush, your unofficial dental confidant, and give it a gentle trim. The scent bursts into the air, sharp and green. You leave a small bundle on your neighbor's stoop, a silent gift of freshness and slightly judgmental herbaceousness. Back inside, you finally prepare your morning blend. Today, cinnamon, mint, and just a pinch of myrrh. You call it the Diplomat. Strong enough to be taken seriously, but polite enough not to cause a scene. You brush slowly, each circle an act of care. The flavors mingle warmly. Spice, coolness, that deep, almost ancient bitterness of myrrh that always reminds you of libraries and incense. You rinse with warm rosewater and make a fresh note. The Diplomat. Excellent blend, calms the gums, freshens, No lingering sting. Repeat tomorrow. With your mouth thoroughly soothed, you turn to a long-delayed project, organizing your pouch of folklore. Over the months, you've collected dreams, superstitions, travelers' tales, and unlikely theories, all somehow tied to teeth. Among them, a sailor's claim that chewing sea glass cured heartbreak, a folk healer's belief that lost baby teeth must be burned before they learn the secrets of the house, a note from a traveling preacher warning against tooth spirits that nest in unbrushed molars and whisper lies in your sleep. Historians still argue whether such stories reflect genuine belief or just the need to explain mysterious aches and pains. You suspect both are true. After all, even now, your own molars seem to have moods and opinions. You copy your favorites into a new notebook titled Tooth Lore and Legends, a Personal Collection. Because why not? Someday, someone may stumble upon it and wonder what kind of person made a spiritual bestiary for their dental life. You spend the afternoon relabeling your herb jars, tightening wax seals, and testing a new combination you're tentatively calling the penance: clove, vinegar powder, and licorice root. It is, as you feared, a bit too zealous. You note it and promise never to make your mouth apologize quite that hard again. Dinner is lentil stew with soft bread, a reward for surviving the penance. You chew slowly, respectfully. No surprises, no protests, just warm food and the quiet satisfaction of surviving another day without sparking a molar mutiny. Evening brushing is simple. Mint and charcoal, your oldest allies. No experiments, just maintenance, gentle circles, warm rinse, a quiet thank you to your stubborn teeth. Before bed, you sit by the fire and make your final entry. The penance, too harsh. Dial back vinegar, rosemary trimmed, tooth lore expanding. My mouth feels mine. You hold the journal in your lap a moment longer, then close it gently. Outside, the wind has shifted. Not quite spring yet, but the world is preparing. You climb into bed and pull the quilt up to your chin. The house creaks once, then settles. Your jaw is still. Your gums are quiet. Even Harold, that grumpy relic in the back, is asleep. You whisper, "Good night, you stubborn, beautiful things," and drift off to sleep with the faintest taste of mint still lingering behind your teeth. The morning air has changed. You feel it before you even open your eyes. There's a softness in the light that filters through the shutters, a pale golden warmth that hums against your eyelids like the beginning of a hymn. Spring is close now. Not quite here, but close enough to rustle the curtains and tickle your bare toes where they peek out from the quilt. You lie still for a moment, listening to your jaw. Nothing. No crackles, no dull murmurs from Mildred, not even Harold clearing his metaphysical throat. Could it be? A truly peaceful morning? You smile, cautiously optimistic, and rise into the soft glow of day. At the basin, you splash your face, then press 2 fingers lightly against your cheeks, feeling along the lines of your jaw. It's loose, relaxed, almost cheerful. You hum under your breath, a little morning tune, and your teeth vibrate in harmony, not rebellion. Today's brushing blend is a celebratory one. Mint, lemon peel, a dash of cinnamon, and a tiny crumble of pine resin. It smells like sunshine and fireplaces and something slightly forbidden. You brush with slow reverence, savoring the way the lemon zings before the mint cools it down. The cinnamon lingers like a warm cloak, and the pine, well, the pine gives it just the faintest sense that you're being watched approvingly by a tree. You rinse, spit into the rosemary bush, and jot in your journal. Spring blend, delightful. Flavor, layered. Breath smells trustworthy. No complaints from the gum tribunal. You spend the morning tidying, not because you must, but because it feels right. You dust the tops of herb jars, refold your cloths, and even polish the pewter lid of your charcoal tin. The house hums with quiet activity, and your teeth, feeling oddly regal today, seem to approve. After a cup of warm oat milk and a small slab of honey cake, you step outside for a walk. The path is no longer slick with ice, only a little muddy in places. You pass neighbors digging in their gardens, airing out blankets, scrubbing porches. The air smells of damp soil and distant blossoms. You wonder if rosemary dreams in spring. At the market, you trade a bundle of dried lavender and a small pouch of mint blend for a wax-sealed tin of imported cinnamon bark. You recognize the trader, Edgar, whose mustache is never the same twice. Today, it's a gentle swoop, with a single feather tied near the end. He claims it improves bartering leverage. You return home with a lighter step, eager to try the fresh cinnamon. That evening, you prepare a new blend. Cinnamon, orange peel, myrrh, and a hint of black tea. You name it the Philosopher. Dark, deep, and a little mysterious. As you brush, your thoughts wander to ancient thinkers. Those who wrote treatises by candlelight, who brewed strange teas and believed that the state of your teeth could reflect the state of your soul. You picture Aristotle rinsing with rosewater, or Hypatia quietly flossing with fine silk thread between philosophical insights. Historians still argue how much attention the great minds of history gave to their mouths. Some records suggest scrupulous routines, others make no mention. But you like to imagine they paused between scrolls to tend their teeth, gently humming theories as they scrubbed away the residue of roasted lamb or lentil mash. You rinse, spit, and write. Philosopher blend success, slightly bitter, but depth worth the effort. Could try stronger orange ratio. Later, while watching the fire shrink into embers, you flip through your notebook of tooth lore again. You add a new entry. If you dream of your teeth floating like boats on a river, it means you're ready for change, or need more calcium. You sketch a tiny sailboat made of molars and close the book with a quiet laugh. Dinner is soft polenta and stewed greens. You chew mindfully, each bite a small tribute to your restored peace. No sparks, no grumbles. Even Harold, once the unmovable curmudgeon of your mouth, seems to have entered retirement. Before bed, you brush one final time with your celebratory spring blend. The lemon and mint blend beautifully now, balanced by the strength of cinnamon and the grounded calm of pine. You lean over the rosemary bush, whisper a quiet apology for the months of use, and water it with care. Back in your room, the sheets are cool but welcoming. You tuck yourself in, rest your hands over your chest, and let your teeth rest too. After all, they've earned it. You close your eyes and drift off with a final line whispered into the dark. Thank you, molars. You've been oddly patient today. You wake just before sunrise. There's a hush in the house, a stillness that feels intentional, as if the walls themselves are holding their breath for something. You lie under the quilt, letting the quiet wrap around you like a warm wool cloak. There's a weightlessness to your limbs, a peace in your jaw, and for the first time in a long time, not even a whisper from Harold or Mildred. The Great Gum Rebellion, it seems, is over. You rise slowly, deliberately, and light a candle. Its glow dances on the walls, throwing gentle golden shapes across the wooden beams. At the basin, you inspect your face in the mirror. Not for vanity, just curiosity. Your cheeks look softer somehow. Less tense. Your jawline less defensive. The corners of your mouth curve up on their own, unprompted. You prepare a morning blend you've now decided to call the Peacemaker. Mint, a touch of fennel, and just a whisper of lavender. Comforting, balanced, and forgiving. You brush with care, not out of fear or habit, but with the kind of tenderness you might use to polish a family heirloom. Gentle, circular motions. A rhythmic glide of cloth across enamel. You rinse with rosehip water and close your eyes. The taste is fresh, clean, and somehow nostalgic. It reminds you of cool linen, handwritten letters, and the sound of leaves underfoot in early autumn. You write your final blend note in the journal. The peacemaker. Ideal. No sting, no bite. The quietest clean. Will keep as default. Then, you underline it once and close the book with a soft thump. A punctuation mark on months of careful, obsessive, oddly joyful experimentation. Later, you spend time bottling your favorite mixtures. The diplomat, the philosopher, the peacemaker, each neatly labeled and tied with twine. A few for friends, a few to store away, a few perhaps for future generations who might wonder what possessed one colonist to devote so much of their life to the fine art of tooth powders. You tidy your work table, oil the hinges of your herb drawers, and sweep the floor until the boards gleam like quiet conversation. As you move about your home, you realize something unexpected. Your mouth no longer feels like a battlefield. It feels like part of you again. Not a problem to solve, not a mystery to decode, just you. At midday, you sip a cup of fennel tea by the window. The sky is pale blue, with a few lazy clouds drifting like sheep who've lost interest in hurting themselves. You watch them without urgency. Outside, the rosemary bush stands tall, proud, and slightly unkempt. A green sentinel that bore witness to every rinse, spit, and herbal confession. You decide not to trim it today. It's earned the right to grow wild for a while. Dinner is soft potatoes, wilted greens, and a square of sweet cornbread. You chew slowly, but not because of fear or precaution. Just because the food tastes good, and it feels nice to enjoy it. Your evening blend is simple. Just charcoal and lavender. One final brushing. One last ritual. You move the cloth slowly, with practiced ease. And when you rinse, it feels like closing the final chapter of a favorite book. Satisfying. A little sad, but complete. You write your last journal entry. Final night blend. Smooth, grounding. No response from molars. Mouth at peace. Mission accomplished. You pause, then add one final line in larger script. Teeth are strange little creatures, but they're mine and they're home. You close the journal, place it on your shelf beside the jar of leftover cinnamon bark, and turn down the lamp. The fire is low. The air is cool. You climb into bed, pull the quilt up to your chin, and feel the familiar weight of your body settling into stillness. You run your tongue over your teeth one last time, clean, quiet, content. Then you close your eyes, and now there's nothing left to do. The fire has gone soft in the hearth, pulsing quietly in amber waves. Outside, the breeze has slowed, brushing gently against the windows like a lullaby too tired to finish its own song. Your body feels heavier with each passing breath. The limbs settle. The jaw slackens. Even the tiniest muscles, those hidden around your mouth, along your cheeks, beneath your eyes, begin to soften, to yield, to rest. In the quiet of this room, lit only by the final glow of candlelight, there's a peaceful stillness. The kind that doesn't ask anything of you. The kind that waits patiently. The kind that says, "You've done enough." The long road of experiments, of scribbled notes, of bitter clove and powdered mint, of clumsy dreams and ghostly molars. It has come to its end. And not with a battle, not with a scream, but with a smile. A clean, contented, restful smile. So let go now. Let your breath drift low into your belly. Let the quilt anchor you gently to the earth. Let the world turn quietly outside your window, while you remain exactly where you are, safe, still, and deeply, wonderfully asleep. Nothing is urgent now, not your to-do lists, not your teeth, not even time. All that's left is rest, and you deserve it. Sleep well, traveler of strange histories. Dream sweetly of rosemary gardens, cinnamon bark, and peppermint winds. Good night.